Hello, everyone. Yeah. Um, I'm Emilia. This is Subscriptions for Authors. We're going to talk about subscriptions and memberships today. Can everyone hear me? Okay, perfect. I'm going to ask to have questions at the end because there's a lot of material I want to get through, but we'll probably have about 10 minutes at the end, if that's good for you guys. All right. So we are going to learn how to start and supercharge your subscription, create superfans, and publish your books on platforms like Ream and Patreon. But before we begin, I want to define what an author subscription is. So an author subscription is where you, the author, host content, and your readers are going to pay you on a reoccurring basis to get that content. So before we begin, I want to tell you a little bit more about myself and my experience with subscriptions. So I write spicy romance. I have about 30-ish books out now, but when I started my first subscription, I had 0 books. So this presentation is going to be for beginner authors and established authors and how to use subscriptions. Currently, I make 6 figures per year on just my subscription business alone. So that's outside of retailers, and we've been doing that for about 4 years now. I have 3 subscriptions, 1 in a book, 1 in comics, physical goods, and we're adding a couple more next year. And I'm also the co-founder of Ream, which is a subscription platform for authors. So why subscriptions? I'm sure you guys know why direct sales. There's a lot of presentations this year about direct sales, and subscriptions are a form of direct selling. So you're going to get more control, and if you are especially romance author, you might have been censored on retailers before, but when you have a subscription, you have that direct connection with your reader, and you have more control over that relationship. You also have more payment information. So on certain platforms, you are going to receive like abandoned cart information, their emails. You'll be able to reach out to your fans and be like, hey, here's maybe a discount for a month if you want to try it out. You also get to see how much money somebody has spent over the lifetime they've been with you in your subscription. And then refunds. I know some retailers love to be kind of refund happy, but when you have a subscription, you control the refunds completely. If somebody comes to you and they're like, I want a refund for something, you don't have to give them one if you don't want to. You can if you do. You also get a more personalized community. So you can't really foster, or it's really hard to foster community on retailers. You might, at the end of your story, direct people to like a Facebook group where they can chat about your books, but it's really hard to get them to continue to click over and join your group. Maybe they don't even have a Facebook account. But with a subscription, you have the ability to foster that community right there. And then, like I said before, you also get their emails, so that's a plus. You also get reoccurring revenue, so you don't have to constantly wonder where your next sale is coming from. You don't need to constantly run paid ads to stores where you're not even getting their email. You don't even know if you're going to get a sale. Also, if you're an established subscription author, you can use your subscription as a form of beta reading. So especially for early access, if you have an early access subscription, which we'll get into in a second, your readers can comment while you're creating the story. So they'll comment on a chapter, they'll comment on a paragraph, and then you can make the story better based off of their comments before you edit it and put it on retailers. And then also, one big fear people have with starting a subscription is, I don't want to cannibalize my sales on retailers. And we found that a lot of these readers who are supporting your subscription are going to be your superfans. And your superfans want to support you. And so they will not only join your subscription, they're also going to go out, and when you publish that book, they're going to buy your ebook, buy your paperback, hardcover, an audiobook too, if they listen to audio. Okay, so there are 2 main models for authors when thinking about subscriptions. And early access is one of them, exclusive access is another. Usually authors choose one or the other, but sprinkle in kind of the second one. So we'll go through a couple, or these 2 today. So we'll start with early access. Early access is basically providing your reader access to the story through your subscription before it's published anywhere else. So before it hits retailers, before you put it in like audio on another platform, these people who are coming in are listening or reading for early access. And a lot of times we see early access authors releasing their rough drafts. So this might scare a lot of you, like, I don't want anyone to see my rough draft, but a lot of your readers might be aspiring authors themselves, and they love being in the creative process with you. They want to see your book go from really rough stages to like the final copy, and they'll read both of those copies and be like, oh, so this is how the character developed, this is how the plot developed, and they just love being in there with you. It's really cool to see. Okay, so we can think of early access in a serialized format working really well for building a fandom and building that community. I'm going to give you guys an example. So I'm sure some of you have heard of the TV show Game of Thrones. Maybe. If not, it's a serialized TV show that's dramatic, fantasy, has dragons in it, and it releases weekly. When it was releasing weekly. So we're going to compare Game of Thrones release model to Netflix when they drop an entire season in one weekend. So when Netflix drops an entire show one weekend, you're binging the show. I know I'm not waiting. I'm going to watch the entire show that weekend. I'm going to be so hype over it, and I'm going to go to like work or talk to my friends that week and be like, oh my gosh, this is the best show ever. Like, I love this show. Maybe I share jokes or memes or whatever it is, but you are building that community a little bit during that week. But then the next week rolls around, another show drops, because that's how Netflix is. You just constantly new shows. So you kind of forget about the first show, and now you're really into the second show. The second show rolls around, Monday comes, you go to work, you share jokes, and yeah, again, show A is completely out of your mind now. And if we compare that to like a early access or even like serialized access model that HBO does for Game of Thrones, they're releasing one episode on Sunday night. It has a cliffhanger at the end. It's super dramatic. Monday rolls around. You are with your friends at work talking about, oh my gosh, I wonder what's going to happen next. Here are my predictions. Here are some jokes about this episode. And then you're talking about it all week. And then the next Sunday rolls around. They drop another episode that's pretty much the exact same. You have super dramatic episode that happens, and then you have that cliffhanger. And then you go to work. You do the same exact thing, and that happens over a 2.5 month period. So they're building that fandom over not just 1 month. So if I'm watching that show on Netflix, I can just subscribe for 1 month, and that's it, and I can leave, and it's over. If I subscribe on HBO, though, they have me locked in. If I want to read or listen to or watch the entire season, I have to be locked in for 2.5 months. So that's kind of how you can think of like an early access serialized model. But then we also have exclusive access. And exclusive access is basically content that you're not going to give your readers anywhere else. It's going to be exclusive to your subscription. And this can be literally any type of content that you want it to be. So it could be bonus content. Maybe you have a bonus chapter or an epilogue. Or it could be digital content like maps, menus that you might have at a restaurant in your store or in your story. So literally anything. We are going to chat a little bit about how to funnel people now into these models. So we're going to talk about early access a little bit more than exclusive access in this presentation, just because early access is accessible to everyone. Exclusive access, you have to have a little bit more of a fandom, established fandom, in order for it to be more successful, or it might take a little bit longer. But early access, anyone at any stage of your career can do. So how you're going to funnel people into your subscription if you run an early access model is you're going to pick your free serial fiction platform. And if you don't write serial fiction, this could be in your newsletter. But if you do write serial fiction, a couple platforms like that are popular for lit RPG are Royal Road. For romance and some fantasy and some YA stuff is Wattpad. So you're going to pick that. And then you're going to find readers on these serial fiction platforms. And you're like, how do you do that? You're going to actively be part of the community. So you're going to go in, read other stories, maybe comment on them, and be like, hey, like, I really love this. And just so you understand how the community works on that specific platform. Next, you're going to release a chapter for free with a cliffhanger. This is specific for serial fiction. If you don't like writing cliffhangers, you don't have to do that. But cliffhangers and serial fiction tend to work really well with a subscription platform. So how are you going to do this? So you are going to pick a time and a day every week, and you're going to stick to that schedule because your readers are going to plan their entire days around your release of that chapter. I've had readers, if I ever miss, I have readers like come to me and they're like, are you okay? Like, are you still alive? And I'm like, yeah, I'm fine. I'm sorry. I was busy. I got caught up. But yeah, these readers are your super fans and they care about you. Most of them are going to be your super fans and they're going to actually care about you as a person. So release regularly, pick a time and day. You're also going to respond to comments and like comments when possible. So your readers think of you as this like super famous person, and they're like, oh my gosh, like if you respond to them, they're going to freak out. They're going to be like, oh my gosh, this person knows I exist. And that's like the best feeling ever. Next, what you're going to do is after you release that, or after you have that cliffhanger, you are going to leave an author's note. And basically the author's note is going to be like, hey, I hope you enjoyed this chapter. It's not going to be part of the story. You're going to maybe put it in bold, maybe say author's note, and you're going to talk directly to your reader at this point. So you're going to say, hey, I hope you enjoyed this story. What did you think of it? Try to get that community flowing, having them interact with you. And then you're going to direct people to your subscription. So how you're going to do that is say, hey, this is chapter 4 that you just read. Chapter 5 releases next week, same time, same day. But if you want to read up to chapter 10 right now, you can come over to my subscription at this link and read all those episodes right now. And so if you have a really great cliffhanger, people are going to be like, I need to read that story right now. I don't want to wait. And so they'll pop over. And this is just an example. So this was an example of my newsletter that I had. I had a chapter, I had a cliffhanger, and I had a button to that specific story. So I'm not bringing people to my page because then they're going to hit like this paywall, and a lot of people are going to be like, ew, I don't want to pay. But if you bring them directly to the story, they're already immersed in that story. Maybe they might reread the chapter and they get to that paywall and they're like, okay, like this is a good enough cliffhanger. I'm going to upgrade. Okay. Next we have an exclusive access funnel. So this is a little bit similar. What you're gonna do though is you're gonna pick your bonus content. So whatever that is for romance, maybe you do spicy romance and you have some not safe for work art. You pick that, for example, and you're going to find where your super fans are. So if you're releasing not safe for work art, artwork is very popular on Instagram. So you might go to your Instagram account if it's active, and there's a lot of people that are always engaged over there, and release it with all like the naughty bits covered, and then say, hey, if you want to actually see the full artwork, come over to my subscription and check it out. So you're making social media posts about it. Maybe you're involving some influencers if you want. You don't have to. And then, yeah, again, directing people over to your subscription. So this can work for any bonus content. It doesn't have to be artwork. Okay. Next, we're going to go a little bit into tiers. So tiers in subscriptions are basically the level of access somebody has to your membership for a select price. So you can have as many tiers as possible. If you're just starting out, I would recommend 3 max. And basically, a reader comes in and subscribes to your tiers. And once they leave that tier, they don't get access to your content anymore. They need to continually stay subscribed month after month if they want to continue reading that story or getting that bonus content. So I will go into a little bit of features and how to frame your tiers and optimize them. Basically, I To start, you want to include what your tier benefits are in the tier. And I would recommend doing this in bullet points and maybe bolding some of like the most important stuff. So for this tier, for example, what I'm drawing most people into for this tier are monthly stickers. But you can do other stuff. You can have exclusive access and art prints. Maybe you have physical goods, literally anything you could think of. But another thing to keep in mind is make sure you're offering benefits that your subscribers and your readers actually want, because at the end of the day, they're going to be the ones subscribing. So if you give them something they don't want, they're just going to leave or not subscribe at all. Next, I would recommend having multiple tiers. And why I recommend this is because it benefits your subscription in multiple ways. You want your customers to have choices. Everywhere else they go to buy your book, they can only purchase it at one price point. So retailers, maybe that's $4.99. They can only support you at $4.99. You're not giving them any choice to support higher. And we'll get into pricing in a little bit. But you want to have your tiers in a way where it's easy to upsell to a higher tier. So yeah, we'll get into pricing in a second. But I want to talk about branding your tiers a little bit and branding your community. So when you're branding your tiers, that's like making a tier name or tier image. You want to make people feel like they are part of your community. And I'll give you an example of a way that one of my favorite shows does it. I am really fond of the anime called Attack on Titan. Some people might have heard of it, but whenever I go to the airport, I always have the sweatshirt that I wear, and it says, give up on your dreams and die. And that's a very harsh quote. And a lot of people, if you don't know that scene, you don't understand what that quote means. So I'll get a lot of like weird looks and like, oh, are you okay? Like, why are you saying that? Like, why is that on your shirt? But the people who know exactly what that quote means and know the context of it, they're like, oh my gosh, I love that show too. And so this complete stranger that I know nothing about, I have a connection with them because they know exactly what my quote means. And I'm like, oh yeah, like I like you because you like the same anime that I like. And you can see this with like sports too. When you go to like a sports bar and people have a jersey on, and you also like that team, you're like, oh yeah, cool, like we're friends now. So think about that in the same way when you're creating your tiers and even branding the name of your entire community. And so yeah, so keeping it personal and distinct, so people aren't just spicy romance lovers or readers when they come into your subscription, they're my specific spicy romance lovers. They're Redwood Girl Gang, which if you haven't read my stuff, you probably don't understand what that is, but everyone who's read it wants to be part of this gang. Okay, so let's go into pricing. Okay, before we start this, I just want to say you're probably undervaluing yourself in some aspects. A lot of times when we publish solely on retailers, there's kind of a race to the bottom. People want to put their stuff for free, and that's a perfectly okay model. I'm not saying don't do that. There's instances where it's really valuable. But when you're pricing your tiers for your subscription, I would price high. I personally would start at $5. I would not start at $1. I know a lot of people want to start at $1. I would say at least $3. Don't be afraid to set that high price point though. So you have multiple tiers, maybe start at $5, but you can go all the way up to like whatever you want. I have a $150 tier that people are subscribed to. I know I have a friend who has a $250 tier, and the tier constantly sells out. So there's like never any openings in the tier where people can join. Just as like an example, I had a reader come in September, and she joined my $5 tier. And 20 days later, she was a completely new to me reader. She didn't really know much about me or my stories. And then 20 days later, she upgraded to my $150 tier. And I was like, oh, why'd you do that? Like, you know nothing about me. But then we had a conversation. I reached out to her, and she was just like super over the moon about joining this $150 tier and giving me all this money. And I was like, oh, okay, thank you. But on the opposite side, I don't want you guys to price too low. And there's a few different reasons. So if you price out $1 for that tier, or your lowest tier, you're going to hit a lot of payment processing fees. Because again, this is direct. You're not going through a retailer. You're going to hit these payment processing fees. So you're not going to end up getting $1. It might be a lot less than that. And then it's also extremely hard to move people from a low tier to a higher tier. A lot of these people readers who come in may be inactive members. So if they're joining for $1, there's not much, they might come in, read a few things, but then they're gonna ignore your emails. Some of them, not all of them, again. And if people are seeing that $1 tier, in some instances, they might think that the quality of the content is a little bit lower. And then again, we're going to price in a way that's easy to upsell. So we're gonna go a little bit into upselling and what that means and how you can upsell in your subscription. So you have multiple tiers. I'll do an early access example. So maybe tier 1, you get access to 1 chapter ahead of a free release. So we were talking about those serials. You are going to get access to 1 chapter ahead of those free serials. Tier 2, you get 2 chapters ahead. Maybe tier 3 is set at $25 a month, and you're gonna get 4 chapters ahead. This is just an example. So this is how I upsell in my subscription. I bring people in. First chapter is free, completely public. You don't need to have an account on the platform. And then they hit chapter 2, and then they have to follow me. So following me, they don't have to pay at all. What they have to do, though, is give me their email. They have to consent, like, hey, it's kind of like a reader magnet. Hey, I want to give you my email in exchange for this chapter. And so they'll give me their email. I'll let them view the content. And then this is chapter 34. We're going to say chapter 5. They hit a paywall. And the paywall is you have to subscribe at $5 a month, and then you will receive this content. And then maybe chapter 10, we hit another paywall that says, hey, now you have to subscribe to a $10 tier. And so it's constantly upselling like that. This is just an example, you don't have to do it this way. But when you're pricing, think of ways that you can upsell. And you can upsell through, like, maybe you're doing physical goods and you have stickers. You bring people in and say, hey, look at these stickers, they're very cheap, they're at my $10 tier. And then your next tier might be $50, but in that tier, they get stickers and they get a book box and they get a book alongside of it. So it's upselling to bring people in. Okay, we're gonna talk a little bit about community building. And this is where I think you should put your time, no matter if you do subscriptions or publish only on retailers or only direct. And we talked a little bit about how to build a fandom, how to build a community, but here are some other tips that you can take. So first one, interact with your readers. So if they do leave comments in your story, make sure you're getting back to them. Even liking their posts or liking their comments that they leave is huge. Sending welcome messages. So when somebody joins your subscription, you say, hey, thank you for joining. I really appreciate you. This is what you get in your tier. And this is where I think you should start. If you have any questions, reach out to me or my assistant, and here's the email. Next, leaving author's notes. I think we talked a little bit about this, so I'm gonna skip over it. Then we can also do creating community post driven for community building. So everybody likes talking about themselves. Everyone has opinions that they wanna express. And so if you say hey, what's your favorite book and why? People are gonna tell you. And that really helps drive that community. And then the example I have on the right-hand side, so this is community building. After all of my community building efforts, this is basically how my community is forming. People are going into my stories and responding and reacting to certain lines in that story. And so Sydney is like, oh my gosh, yes, I think this is what this means. And then Heidi is responding to her. And then we have Muse, who is responding to Heidi, who's responding to Sydney. So it's constantly people now not just talking back to you, but talking to each other. So it's starting to form that community bond. Okay, next, a lot of you may be very hesitant about building a community or building a Facebook group, for example. But I want to show you 5 different ways that you can kind of host your community and ways that you can lead it. So the first way is you base the community around yourself. You base the brand around you as an author, and you come to them. Maybe you are very extroverted and personable, and you like talking to other people. And so you might host monthly Zoom calls for your readers, and you just jump on the call and say, hey, like, tell me about yourself, tell me what you're reading. But I know a lot of authors, including myself, I hate doing that. It's not something I like. So what you can do is you can take on the persona of a fictionalized character. Maybe it's a character that you've built in your own story worlds. Maybe it's just somebody who you want to be. So you're coming to your readers as somebody else. Next, you can lead your community as the expert, so everyone's coming to you to learn. And this works really well if you're doing a lot of nonfiction. So people are subscribing to your content to understand a specific, something specific. Next, you can build your entire community around characters in your worlds. So this is a little bit different from the second one, where you're coming as the character. You build the brand around your characters and your story. And then the 5th way to build a community is making your world as immersive as possible. So we'll take Harry Potter for an example. If that brand had a subscription, they could name each of their tiers a different house. And if you are like part of that house, you join that tier, and maybe they can have like different challenges every month. So it's really immersing your readers into your world for number 5. Okay, so I'm going to just pop in with a few examples of authors in all stages of their career doing subscriptions. So the first one is Pia Foxhall, and she might not be super well known on retailers, but she is a pop star in an online serial fiction platform, actually fan fiction. So she's popular on AO3, and she writes tons of different genres, but she is constantly funneling people in through her serial fiction platform. And I think she's been doing this for like 7-ish years now. Next, we have Jack Steen. So Jack Steen, we were talking a couple slides ago about building around a brand or around a story. So when you come into Jack Steen's subscription, you are not a horror reader, not a horror lover. You are a new patient in this asylum that they've built their subscription around. So it's extremely immersive, and it kind of puts you right in there with them. Next, we have Kat T. Mason. She's an established romance author, really popular on TikTok and on the retailers. She launched her subscription a couple months ago. And what she does is an early access model. It's not serialized, but she is just breaking her story up into the chapters she would normally write and dropping them once every week or so. But what she does that's pretty cool is she will keep her subscription open for 1 week, really push it really hard for that week, and then close it off after that week is over. So nobody else can join it, and nobody else can read that work before it's published. Okay, next we're going to go into a little bit of a mindset shift you have to have when you're coming from retailers only to subscriptions, or just like crowdfunding in general. So main thing is, when you have a subscription, you are giving your readers access. It's not a commodity. So they are receiving access to your community and your content on a monthly basis. And when they're reading that story over time, they're becoming more immersed in that world and invested in that world. So they might be more, they might want, after it's finished and after it goes on direct or retailers, they might want to help promote it more because they're more invested in your story. Next, how you view your readers and your fans should change. So a lot of times when we're publishing on retailers, we see like one person is just like $4.99 to us, like their money. But when you have a subscription, you have to shift your thinking because your fans are not just money. They're fans with real people, they're people with real opinions and thoughts and feelings on certain things. And they're not just dollar signs. Even if they have money, even if these are super fans and they want to spend a lot of money on you, they're not just money. And you should treat them as real people. Next, price high, or at least have tiers that are priced high. You can price low if you want to, but make sure you have those tiers that are high, because unlike purchasing a book where a reader just comes in and purchases at one price point, you're not forcing, if you have high tiers, you're not forcing people into those tiers. So they have the option of choosing any price point that they're comfortable and that they can afford. And it ultimately is their choice whether they want to support you or not. So if they want to support you at $150 a month, let them. You're not forcing them into it. And then thinking long-term versus short-term. So selling one book is relatively easy, but selling a fandom is going to take a lot longer, but it's going to be worth it in the end. You're not going to be an overnight success with subscriptions. It's going to happen over an extended period of time, maybe longer than you want it to, but they are a longer game, and it really helps when you have a subscription to build and foster that community because they're going to be with you for life. Okay, we're going to dive a little bit into this, but actually I'm just going to skim this slide. So for those of you who might have more established subscriptions or have been doing it for a while, we talk about advanced subscriptions, and we define advanced subscriptions as anything that costs a lot of money or costs a lot of time or physical labor to do. And a lot of times with advanced subscriptions, you need at least another team member to help you. Just set it up and figure out all the logistics of it. But some of these advanced subscriptions could be audio subscription, physical goods, maybe you have a book box, or adaptations into comics or animation or TV or whatever you want it to be. Okay, next we're going to go into the 3 six-figure subscription rules that I think you should follow. And this should be the core of every subscription business, is be consistent. So if you promise your readers that you're going to publish 4 chapters a month, make sure you're publishing 4 chapters a month. And this kind of ties in with under promise and over deliver. So if you know you can't do 4 chapters a month, don't promise it. Promise 2 chapters, and if you can do another chapter, if you can do 3, if you can do 4, that's kind of like a bonus, like a little gift for your readers, and they'll be super happy to get it. And then also always pivot. It's constantly, your tiers might change over time. They're probably going to. What you offer people as rewards are probably going to change over time. But being able to pivot is really important just so you can continue to grow. And this is an example. I actually have 2 examples, 2 graphs from my personal subscriptions. As you can see, January to February of this year, we kind of stalled out. This is a comic subscription that I'm doing. Nobody was joining. Actually, I think I lost a couple of people. And we changed up how we were releasing the content and where we were releasing the content. And as you can see, it started to shoot back up again. So just constantly pivoting when something might not be going your way. And this is basically my writing subscription that I had started a few years ago. You can see a little bit, you can see where I was very inconsistent because there's nobody who was joining. So from like January to probably like June-ish, very inconsistent. At that June-ish point, we started publishing every week at a specific time and date. And you can see it start to shoot up. And then I shifted my writing a little bit, pivoted the genre, and it exploded. Okay. So you might be very overwhelmed because I threw a lot of information at you, especially if you're new to subscriptions. And this could lead to decision overload, overwhelm, and I want to help you figure out where to start. So if you're completely new, we're starting from zero. So if I was starting from zero, this is exactly how I would do it. I would do an early access model with serialized content. So chapters are shorter. I got that cliffhanger to hook people. Starting small. So if you're just starting, please, you can look at authors who have larger subscriptions as inspiration, but sometimes they've had experience in this model for a long time, and they shifted a lot based on what their team can handle. So always starting small and doing something that you know you can do and commit to for an extended period of time is where you should start. Just launch. I know a lot of people get so hung up in launches on retailers. They're super important. You want to get to the top of the store. But with subscription, like I said before, it's a long game. Your launches don't really need to matter that much because you're constantly pivoting and making your business better. And then no paid advertising, no audio, and no physical goods to start. You can if you want, but this is just my recommendation. Okay. So if you want to learn more about subscriptions, we have a lot of free resources on subscriptionsforauthors.com. And then we're also running an accelerator right now. And if you want 20% off, there's there's a QR code and a code up there that you can use. But I'll leave this up because I see a lot of people are taking pictures. But I am open to questions now, if anyone has any. And if you do, please go up to the microphone. I think it's on. I don't know.
Oh. You can hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I have a question. So if you have, I'm trying to think, what would be the best way to get your social media following to get a subscription? Like, do you think by posts or utilizing your email list? What's the best way to do that?
Yeah, so I wouldn't make any, so I would always use newsletter lists if you have it. If you're talking about social media specifically, I wouldn't do when you see them, they're like marketing post, and they're a marketing post. Right. Those tend not to do well, or as good in my experience. But what you can do is, if you have like I was saying before, like artwork, or maybe you want to just show off your book. You have the book cover already and you're updating it in your subscription. Just make a post about it. I would add the book. Maybe you have a nice bookshelf in the back and just say like, hey, here's my book. Here are the tropes. If you want to read the first chapter for free, come over to my subscription at this link, or have the link in your bio. Okay. Does that make sense?
That makes sense.
Okay, perfect.
Thank you.
Yeah.
You said there were 3 rules and you only gave us 2.
Oh, sorry.
What was the third one?
I think I looped.
Sorry.
Oh, I'll leave this up. I think I looped them together. So be consistent. The three subscription rules: be consistent, under promise and over deliver, and then pivot. Those are the 3. Sorry about that.
So my question is about the time when you start, like your early access.
Yes.
Does everyone start at the same time, or you have people continually joining?
So you can do it 2 different ways. How I personally do it is I will start releasing a story to my higher tiers. So maybe tier 3, they're paying me a little bit more money. They get a chapter a couple weeks ahead of everyone else. And then I'll release the next chapter to tier 2. And then another week later, release the first chapter again to tier 1. So it's kind of tiered in that way, and then I will release it to everyone who's reading for free. Does that make sense? Round robin style. Sort of, yeah. Does that make sense, or do you want me to clear?
I'm just saying, like, if I don't see the invitation to start or to join maybe a month after you started the first one, and I want to read the first chapter for free, then I want to start to pay. Can I do that, or are you just like, no, if you don't start by
So,
certain date, then you just out? Is that everything?
so I don't run mine like that. I have people constantly coming in because I'm constantly releasing on a serial platform. If you don't write serialized format, Kat, you should study Kat T. Mason. What she does is she opens her subscription for that week period. And then after that week's up, nobody else can read that story again. They might be able to read the first chapter for free, but they can't read that story for the next few months before she opens it up again and funnels more people in during that period, and then she'll close it up. And yeah, I hope that answered it. Okay. Yes, yeah. Hello.
Hi. So I know you mentioned in your presentation kind of the ideal way to start would be on a free platform, build following with a cliffhanger, bring people over. For Ream specifically, I'm interested in Ream. Are you driving people to the platform on your own, or is this more of a bring your own people type of platform?
So for Ream specifically, right now it's set up in a way where authors bring their readers, but we're launching phase 1 of discovery actually in the next 60 days. So that will be, people are able to search by genre.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I've already answered part of this, but for someone like me, my first book comes out in spring. Is this something that would benefit me to start setting it up before that comes out? Should you wait until it's been out for a while and you have readers? Or like for me, I have a decent following on social media. I would probably maybe get a few people, but I didn't know if it's worth it to do that or wait.
Yeah, so I would recommend, I'm a little biased because I love subscriptions. So I always recommend to start as soon as possible. Just make sure you have your tier set up and you know what you can do. But if you do have a social media following, what I would do is maybe drop the story early in your subscription and say hey, if you guys want early access to this, it's only available on this platform. So come over now. It's going to drop in a few months on retailers, but if you want it right now and you maybe juice up the post a little bit with an excerpt or something and say come over to my subscription. Yeah. Hello.
So I finally got my first 4 subscribers this year for Patreon.
Yay.
I think I may have overpromised a bit when I first launched it.
Mm-hmm.
So now I find myself kind of uh-oh.
Yeah.
What would you tell your subscribers, or do I open up another tier and just keep it maybe just for them?
So you can close the tier if you want to. If it's too much for you, I would just be honest with them and say, hey, I can't keep up with this workload, but I can promise this amount of content a month. And that might be a chapter a month, or I don't know what your rewards are, but I would just be really honest with them. Don't just stop all of a sudden and be hey, I can't do this. I can't keep up with this because I have something else going on. It's just really stressful. You don't have to say what it is. But yeah, I would just be honest and be open.
Okay.
Yeah.
So when you're getting started,
Yes.
and you built everything, you put your tiers up, and you've promised certain things for certain tiers.
Mm-hmm.
But nobody has subscribed to, say, your highest tier. Do you still just produce that content and put it out so that it shows that you did it, but if nobody else is going to have access to it?
You can if you want, and then possibly reuse that content later. I know me and my team set up an audio subscription this past year, and we didn't have many people on it, but we were continuously posting on the subscription, just so when people saw it, they were oh, okay, there's content there. She's not just messing with us.
Okay.
So yeah, I would do that. Do you have something with that? Yeah.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
In the second tier, and you're ooh, there's 15 posts in that top tier.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of want to know what's
Yeah.
there. That it helps if you know, because I
Yeah.
actually subscribed because of that. I was oh, this one has the dirty stuff, and this one has that tier.
Okay, great. Thank
Cool. I think that's all the questions that we can answer. But if you have any other ones, you can come up to me after it's all over. But yeah.